Okay, so hi guys, I'm back with another video on IBD and gastroenteritis series. So last time we did some findings of inflammatory bowel disease and what are the close differentials of inflammatory bowel disease when a patient comes to you in the hospital. So I did deal with tuberculosis and IBD US. I've not gone in detail of all the types of IBDs, etc. Because that can be another lecture where there are a lot of scoring systems. It is not very important for a pathologist giving an MD exam, but a pediatric pathologist or someone who's reporting an IBD, those scoring systems become important. So what we'll do is we are going to take another lecture separately for scoring systems of IBD. Now, what is important over here for you to understand is that another very close differential of an IBD is eosinophilic gastroenteritis. Okay, so with eosinophilic gastroenteritis, the problem is that a lot of times the histopathological features of a eosinophilic gastroenteritis, which may or may not have a previous history of a cow milk protein allergy or any sort of food allergy, the histomorphological features might overlap an ulcerative colitis, and that we get very commonly over here. Okay, so the these are the learning objectives, as in what points you need to be, aware of when you are looking at a slide of eosinophilic gastroenteritis, because it's a close differential for IBD. So we need to understand the pathogenesis of how the eosinophils affect the differential diagnosis, the histopathological findings, and of course the diagnostic criteria, which I'll be taking in the second part of this lecture. So today we'll just be dealing with a bit of pathogenesis, a very short lecture. The actual histomorphology and histomorphological clues we'll be doing in the second part of this lecture. Okay. So it is a part of eosinophilic gastrointestinal disorder characterized by eosinophilic rich inflammation. Now in the GI tract, now please remember that each part of the gut has a normal cutoff for the type of eosinophils or the amount of eosinophils which are there in the lamina propria. So when the particular cutoff in that particular esophagus cutoff is different, stomach cutoff is different, duodenum cutoff is different, colon cutoff is different. So when the eosinophils increase the cutoff criteria, or they are present in clusters of more than 5 or 6, or they are seen invading the lining mucosa, the epithelial lining of the crypt, these findings become significant. Eosinophils lying here and there scattered in the gut mucosa is not an abnormal finding. That is a normal finding. So you will get normal eosinophils in the in the mucosal lining of the gut epithelium. That is not to be diagnosed as an eosinophilic disease. Okay. So they are normally present in stomach, small bowel, cecum, colon, and normal esophagus lacks eosinophils, specifically the squamous epithelium part. And of course, the chemical is eotaxin 1, which regulates GI eosinophil homing. Homing means the eosinophil comes to that mucosa and stays there. That is governed by eotaxin 1. So there can be a primary disease where just the eosinophils come with the trigger might be unknown, and it's not an infection, it's not a parasite. It can be primary. It can be a hypereosinophilic syndrome, that is a hematological disorder leading to GI eosinophilia, and then it can be due to infection, drugs, IBD, malignancies, and allergy. Okay. So the T helper 2 cells, interleukin 5/13, eotaxin, mast cells. They play a big role in the eosinophils getting mobilized and homing in the gut epithelium or the lamina propria, and food allergy and atopic reactions are the commonest triggers for this to happen. Major basic protein, eosinophilic cationic protein, EDNs, and eosinophilic peroxidase. These are the chemicals involved in degranulation of eosinophils and histomorphological findings, which you find at that site of the eosinophil homing. Okay. So what happens is whenever the eosinophil goes to a particular site, just like a neutrophil, just like any other inflammatory cell, it will cause tissue damage. There will be increased vascular permeability and edema because of the chemicals which I have just taken the names of being released by the eosinophils on degranulation. there will be smooth muscle contraction. You should know that bowel has smooth muscle for motility. Of course, if it is a long-standing insult and injury, it will heal with fibrosis and remodeling, but leave behind some form of dysmotility or neuronal dysfunction because of this fibrosis and remodeling. So you need to understand this, that eosinophils, when they are just like neutrophils. So when they are inflammatory cells, they'll release chemicals. So when they are in your mucosa and they exceed a particular number, then that is the time they cause histomorphological symptomatology, which very closely can mimic a inflammatory bowel disease. Okay. Abdominal pain, vomiting, the symptomatology is similar to an IBD, nothing different. 75% patients have atopy or food allergy. There's family history and elevated IgE levels, very commonly seen with eosinophilic gastroenteritis. CBC with eosinophil count is very important, especially if the cases of CMPA, cow milk protein allergy, etc. Because you might get peripheral blood eosinophilia in the active phase of allergy when the child is having diarrhea in CMPA. Stool examination for parasites is imperative. Multiple endoscopic biopsies are needed. Allergy testing very rarely done. It is expensive but can be done, and serum IgE levels as an important testing tool where the IgE may be raised, especially in cases of hypereosinophilic syndrome and those kind of familial syndromic cases. So, physiological presence of eosinophils see there are normal eosinophils present. I've already told you each part of the gut has a cutoff. I'll show you the cutoff in the next lecture. Now, that is physiological. Normally, gut shows some eosinophilia because we are having food, we are having foreign material. Some protection is needed in the gut in the form of cells, in the form of immunoglobulins. But when the cutoff increases, that leads to gastrointestinal eosinophilia, which can be primarily due to some heritable cause. It can be HES-like, or it can be due to, as I've already told you, some parasite, some IBD, some other infection going on, some drugs, GVHD like features in mycophenolate mofetal toxicity. In cases of MMF is given to post-transplant cases. That is an immunomodulant. So you get a lot of, so when the toxicity of MMF happens, you get a lot of eosinophils in the gut mucosa. So GVHD, we have to differentiate. So for a post-transplant case with diarrhea, we have to differentiate GVHD from eosinophilic gastroenteritis or drug-induced toxicity. Important because the therapy differs. Hence, histomorphological clues are very important in diagnosing such cases. So for GVHD, we'll go for apoptotic bodies. For MMF toxicity, there may be lesser apoptotic bodies, but there will be a lot of eosinophils in the lamina propria, as well as destruction of crypt epithelium by eosinophils if it is a large intestinal biopsy. So we as pathologists need to be very alert as to where we are seeing the eosinophils and what number of eosinophils are we seeing. Okay. So if it is mild eosinophilia, the amount of eosinophils are not that much, the endoscopic finding may be normal. Depending on the degree of eosinophils infiltrating the mucosa, it can be a patchy or a diffuse involvement with ulcers, edema and nodularity. And this is the reason, this part over here, that it is a close differential for inflammatory bowel disease, specifically ulcerative colitis. Of course, as I said, the density, the number of eosinophils, where the eosinophils are attacking, the degranulation, which is can be seen in tall blue staining, and of course associated tissue injury. You'll always see vascular permeability and edema because the eotaxin, etc., that comes out from the degranulated product increases vasodilation and increases the permeability of the vessels. So mostly when there's eosinophilic injury in a histopathological specimen, you'll get lots of eosinophils. You'll see eosinophilic cryptitis and you'll see edema and dilated vessels, maybe some congestion. So that finding is always there when eosinophils are involved in the injury. Detail of all this, the cutoffs, what they look like, how is an eosinophilic abscess defined in the gut mucosa, how is eosinophilic cryptitis looking, how is it different from a neutrophilic cryptitis or a cryptabscess, all that I'll show you in the part 2 of this lecture. So this is the reference. This is a very good paper used by ZooOL. You can go and read. I have made the lecture with using this paper. This is a reference for this paper. And furthermore, the other part, the images are taken from here and there, but the reference is similar to this paper. You do not, you will get maybe a 2-mark question. You can just be asked in the Viva, or if you're writing about inflammatory bowel disease, which you will be asked in the exam, then you can mention about eosinophilic gastroenteritis. This is for the students. For people who are practicing, you need to identify an eosinophilic gastroenteritis from an IBD, from a TB. Why? Because and if it is a post-transplant setup, then from a MMF or a drug toxicity, because the treatment differs. So when you see eosinophils and you make a diagnosis, your treatment will be on that diagnosis. So if it is an MMF toxicity and you call it a parasite, they'll give treatment for parasite, and it was a drug toxicity, and the patient will still suffer and the patient may become serious. So you really need to understand where, when, why of this eosinophil in the gut mucosa to actually diagnose the case properly. So part 1 ends over here. In the part 2, again, I'll come after 15 days and tell you the histopathological findings of eosinophilic gastroenteritis and how you can differentiate it from other differentials of IBD, etc. So I hope you like this short lecture. You can call it a lecture. It's very, very short, just 11-minute lecture. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.